equipment maker. Over in the Senate today, they are spending the day on a veterans jobs bill. It creates work training and gives vets preferences for certain types of federal jobs. The Senate's on C-SPAN 2 and now live to the House floor here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Reverend Chris Holzmeyer, Second Baptist Church, Clinton, Tennessee.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you this day with praise upon our lips. You are worthy of all glory and honor. You are faithful, and you hear us when we call. We come to you this day to say thank you. You have given to us a free and prosperous nation in which to live. We know that you and you alone are the provider of that freedom and prosperity. We also come before you acknowledging our great sins as a nation. We ask your forgiveness as we seek your will for the future of our country. As our leaders gather in this room to discuss the business of this day, bless them with wisdom and knowledge to make the best possible decisions for our citizens. And may their actions, their words, and their motives bring you honor and glory. We ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. And pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schilling.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fleischman, will be recognized for 1 minute.
It is my pleasure to welcome Chris Holzmeyer to join me here on the House floor to give the opening prayer. Pastor Holzmeyer recently served as an associate pastor at Second Baptist Church in Clinton, Tennessee, a town in my district. With a desire to serve the Lord in both word and deed, Chris has authored 2 devotionals, the First Responder Field Manual and Lessons from the Locker Room. A passionate advocate for international adoption, Chris advocated for the adoption awareness and established the Kyle Reagan Foundation that raises money to help adopt children from abroad. In Tennessee, Chris has been active as well, coordinating the 2012 Anderson County National Day of Prayer, running the Summer Skills basketball camp at Second Baptist Church, and ministering to local officials. In addition to his strong ties to Tennessee, Chris also has a Washington connection. He served as Assistant Communications Director for the D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Statesmanship on Capitol Hill from 2004 to 2006. While on Capitol Hill, he performed outreach to members and staff. A native of Indiana, Chris received his B.A. from University of Southern Indiana and his master's degree from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary. Along with his wife, Missy, and his children, Kyle and Sammy, I would like to thank Chris, and I am pleased that he could join us in prayer. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The Chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the month of August, I traveled throughout my Arkansas district listening to the challenges family farmers are facing with record drought conditions. Even though the House did pass an important drought relief package, we need to pass a farm bill. We must acknowledge the role farm families play in our nation's economy. The success story of Arkansas and American agriculture can continue if Congress acts to pass sound policies. The message from my constituents in rural America is clear. We need a farm bill now. The Farm Bill needs to be a priority of the House, as it is critically important not only to my home state of Arkansas, but to all of rural America. At a time when many Americans have lost faith in the ability of Congress to accomplish great things, a comprehensive Farm Bill has the potential to be an example of what can be done when we put aside partisan politics and pass sound policy. We need a Farm Bill now. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise? Gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Imagine if our farmers did their jobs the way Congress has been doing its job. I know what you're thinking. We'd all starve, wouldn't we? We've got a job to do, folks, and you just heard it from my colleague on the other side of the aisle. There is no reason that our pleas for help on behalf of our farmers have gone unheeded. We've been asking since early this summer, give the farmers the certainty they need to be able to do their jobs on our behalf to protect our food security, which is linked to our national security. It expires in a couple of weeks. I don't want to go home. My colleagues don't want to go home. We don't want to leave this body until we do our job on behalf of the farmers. And if anyone thinks that a 6-month extension, kicking the can down the road is sufficient, well, I encourage you to go visit my farmers, particularly my dairy farmers, the McCormicks, the Burwangers, the Nobles, the Zittles, the Kerners, people I've met over our 5-week break who thought for sure we'd be able to pull together in a bipartisan way and do it. There's still time, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to go home. Let's not go home until we take care of our farmers and get the job done right. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Request unanimous consent for 5 legislative days to revise and determine March.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, on September the 1st of 2012, a tragedy occurred at the Quad City Air Show when a 30-year-old L-39 fighter jet fell from the sky, claiming the life of a veteran pilot. Glenn Smith, or Skids as he is remembered by his fellow hoppers of Frisco, Texas, never shied away from an adventure. He lived life to the fullest as a certified scuba diver, a licensed sailor, and a self-proclaimed struggling golfer. Nearly 3 decades ago, he took one of the greatest risks and started what would eventually become a successful business. In 2006, Skids retired to pursue his true passion, flying. Restoring and flying fighter jets wasn't just a hobby to him, it was a way to share a piece of our nation's history with people across the country. Skids will always be remembered by those he motivated through his mission to educate the general public, inspire kids to work hard in school, aim high in life, and have fun. Skids' enthusiasm for life will truly be missed. My thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends and teammates he leaves behind. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise? Gentlewoman's recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker, I join in asking for calm along with Secretary Clinton in this violent and tumultuous world, and particularly the actions that are going on in Yemen, Cairo, and certainly Libya. I offer my deepest sympathy to those who lost their lives, but I stand again to say, as the Secretary indicated this morning, that the American people and the American government had absolutely nothing to do with this heinous film, but we reject the horrible and horrific violence. I'm also saddened to hear that resources probably prevented some of the reinforcing of some of our embassies. We cannot shortchange security, the securing of the homeland. And as we go forward in dealing with sequestration, I beg that we understand that we must protect those who serve us overseas, including the United States military. But I call for peace. And I know the American people realize that no religion should be denigrated, but we cannot accept and will not accept and will stand against any violence against the American people or those who serve us in a civilian manner with honor and dignity. To their families, I offer my deepest sympathy and a commitment that we will stand against terrorism. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Kansas rise? Gentlewoman's recognized for 1 minute.
This week, Moody's threatened to downgrade the U.S. credit rating if Washington fails yet again to deal with the long-term debt problem. This is not news. We were downgraded last year, but instead of acting to fix the problem, this administration racked up a $1 trillion deficit for the 4th year in a row. And now we face a fiscal cliff that could cause another recession. Enough with the short-term fixes, patches, gimmicks, and tricks. They only make the problem worse. This country needs comprehensive budget and tax reform. This means a simpler tax code that is more fair and efficient, and fundamental spending reform that will save Medicare. We have a rare opportunity to put this country back on the right track to ensure a more prosperous future for our children. Let's take it. It's time to put the American people first. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from the Northern Mariana Islands rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I ask you to join me in celebrating the 60th anniversary of Mount Carmel School and its proud record serving students in the Northern Mariana Islands from their elementary through high school years. Since opening its doors, the school has constantly expanded, adding new facilities, state-of-the-art information technology, and a standards-based curriculum with accreditation from the Western Associations of Schools and Colleges. Mount Carmel School has cultivated some of our island's most notable business, government, and community leaders. As elected officials, doctors, attorneys, car mechanics, cooks, carpenters, teachers, and business executives, the school's alumni stands as inspiring pillars in our community. From humble beginnings in 1952, the school has evolved into an institution whose name is synonymous with educational excellence in our community. I offer my congratulations to all those who have been affiliated with Mount Carmel School over these past 60 years, teachers, staff, students, alumni, and parents. I have every confidence that the next 6 years will be marked by the same level of accomplishment. Go Knights. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the No More Solyndras Act. It ensures that taxpayers are never left on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars for any future president's risky bets. This legislation phases out the Department of Energy's flawed loan guarantee program. It seeks to stop future debacles like the recent $535 million loan guarantee for the California solar panel manufacturer called Solyndra. This administration refuses to promote legitimate, safe domestic energy resources by issuing moratoriums in the Gulf of Mexico and needlessly delaying very important projects like the Keystone Pipeline. Instead, it chooses to roll the dice on unproven technologies that result in bankruptcies with hundreds of millions of wasted taxpayer dollars. That's not a way to move forward. In South Louisiana, we know when it comes to energy production, domestic resources are waiting to be tapped safely, environmentally sound. And whether it's oil or natural gas or any other source, we must harness the resources of our land to create jobs here at home and to make sure that hard-working families aren't forced to feel the pain at the pump. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak about the responsibility that this institution has to the American people to finish the work they sent us here to do. Partisan gridlock may make 2012 one of the Congress's least productive years in decades. That's why this institution has seen some of the lowest public approval ratings in history. The American people expect better from their elected officials. They know that members of Congress should be acting like adults and working with members on the other side of the aisle to get things done. Each of us should remember the people we serve, the seniors who worked for years to secure a successful retirement, the students who took out loans to help pay for college, the middle-class families who are concerned about their long-term economic security. Rather than meeting for only 8 days this month, as Republicans propose, let's remain here, pass the American Jobs Act that the President proposed over a year ago, put aside partisanship, roll up our sleeves, and get back to work for the people we serve. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it is with a heavy heart that all Americans reflect upon the tragic loss of life in the American consulate in Benghazi. When one of our own pays the ultimate sacrifice in the service of our nation, we're all touched by the loss. All 4 of these brave Americans will forever be remembered in the annals of American history as heroes. In particular, I'd like to take the time to pay tribute to Ambassador Chris Stevens, a native of Northern California. Although I did not know the ambassador personally, his father, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jan Stevens, ably served our state in the California Department of Justice while I served as Attorney General of my home state. This tragedy hits close to home with all of the employees of the California Department of Justice who work with Jan Stevens. I wish to join them, with friends and family members of the Stevens, and with all Americans in offering our thoughts and prayers as we mourn the loss of Ambassador Chris Stevens.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise?
Question, permission to address the House for 1 minute and revise my remarks.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in a few short hours, a giant in the state of Connecticut, Coach Jim Calhoun, is going to announce his retirement after 26 years of leading the men's basketball program. When he arrived 26 years ago, it was an also-ran program. Today, he has secured 3 national championships. He was inducted to the Hall of Fame. The NBA is populated with graduates like Ray Allen, Emeka Okafor, Kemba Walker, who are all-stars and really make the state of Connecticut so proud. But he also has performed hundreds of acts of personal kindness, small and large, Coaches Against Cancer, the UConn Cardiology Health Center program, and his latest passion, which is to help families with the scourge of autism. Coach Calhoun is not just a great coach, he's a really good person. And to him and his wife, Pat, on behalf of the people of the 2nd Congressional District, I want to extend my congratulations for his great leadership and career and wish them all the success in the world as they begin a new chapter in their wonderful lives. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of Americans 12.5 million obese youth. I stand on behalf of America's 3.7 million low-income children between the ages of 2 and 4 who are either overweight or obese. Millions of our children depend on school meals and the generosity of food pantries for most of their nutrients. These are the children I've come to speak to you about today. September is National Childhood Obesity Awareness Month, the month when Americans are reminded of the plight facing our children if we don't ensure they receive better meals and build an environment that promotes physical activity. It is time to get involved in the well-being of every child in America. So join me. Make a difference in a child's life during National Childhood Obesity Awareness Month and all year long. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
To address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, to revise and extend.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I refuse to participate in what I call Medicare class warfare. I refuse to pit those who are 55 and above against those who are under 55. Mr. Speaker, I believe that those of us who are above 55 ought to want the same health care for those who are under 55 that we are going to receive. I refuse to participate in Medicare class warfare. I believe that those who are at the dawn of life should know that they will have the same health care benefits that we will have at the twilight of life. Again, I refuse to participate in Medicare class warfare. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise to bring attention to the town of Waterbury, Vermont. An article in the Boston Globe identifying it as the best beer town in New England. In this small town, beer pilgrims from across the country flock to appreciate and enjoy the finest beer in America. It's the quality of the beer that's brewed that's really revered. And let me just tell you about a few. It's the home to the Alchemist Cannery, which makes an IPA called Heady Topper. I can tell you personally, it's really, really good. The Beer Advocate, the Bible of the beer community, rates it as the 3rd best in the world. The beer is sold in cans, but it sells out early, so get there early. It's not hard to see why it's so popular when it's the 3rd best in the world. But there's others there. Waterbury is the home to a number of restaurants, the Prohibition Pig, the Blackback Pub, and Arvid's, to name a few, with great beer lists.
Expired.
Vermont is coming back from Hurricane Irene. In Waterbury, it's 1 beer at a time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my Democratic colleagues today have criticized Republicans in Congress as do-nothings, but my own view is a little different. It is certainly true that the nation has real needs. Economists tell us that legislation held hostage here would create millions of jobs, put many Americans back to work. Instead of addressing those needs, Congress is just dysfunctional. But considering what Republicans in Congress want to do, it is a great blessing that Congress has done next to nothing. They have repeatedly voted to repeal health care reform, 33 times according to one count, as if denying health insurance for pre-existing conditions would put America back to work. They have voted to gut or eliminate the funding for Wall Street reform, putting us right back where we were 5 years ago in the Bush administration, the policies that created the painful downturn that we are now in. They voted 55 times, at least 55 times, to restrict women's reproductive rights and access to affordable health care, including repeated attempts to eliminate funding for Planned Parenthood. It is hard to see that as a job creation agenda. Mr. Speaker, better to do nothing than what they want to do.
What purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
For 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm ready to cut taxes for Americans, average Americans, the middle class, and rebuild our infrastructure. Unfortunately, after wasting the last 2 years and after spending the entire month of August at home without making even the slightest effort to fix the nation's economy, the Tea Party Republicans plan to adjourn next week for another 6 weeks after being here for 8 days. Instead of going on vacation, why don't we fix the nation's business? Why don't we handle the business that we have to take care of? We act like petulant children around here, these Tea Party Republicans, obstinate in their demands to cut taxes for millionaires and turn Medicare into a voucher program. We can't afford to continue to handle our business like this. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Congress to get to work. I think we should stay here and not leave for another 6 weeks with leaving the nation's business
Gentleman's
hanging.
time has expired.
I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 779 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 161, House Resolution 779. Resolved, that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 6213, to limit further taxpayer exposure from the Loan Guarantee Program established under Title 17 of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 90 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce now printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 112-31. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to that amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the committee of the whole to the bill, or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. It shall be in order at any time on the legislative day of September 20th, 2012, or September 21st, 2012, for the Speaker to entertain motions that the House suspend the rules as though under Clause 1 of Rule 15.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of the debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my friend from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all times yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 779 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 6213. This rule provides for the discussion and opportunities for members of the minority and the majority to participate in this debate. I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. The underlying legislation assures that all American taxpayers will never again be forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars because of this administration's politically motivated risky bets. H.R. 6213 draws on the lessons learned from the failed Department of Energy loan guarantee program, which invested $535 million into a solar energy company named Solyndra. Unfortunately, Solyndra went bankrupt, leaving hard-working Americans with a check for over $500 million. Solyndra has become synonymous with the Obama administration's reckless spending programs that have done nothing to create the jobs our country so desperately needs, nor those that had been promised by the President of the United States and the Democratic Party. Despite warnings that the company was unsustainable and would surely fail, the administration was blinded by their political agenda and committed over $500 million in taxpayer dollars to a privately held company. In fact, during a 2011 restructuring of the loan, the administration placed private investors ahead of taxpayers when it came to reimbursement in the event of bankruptcy. Given these practices, it's no wonder that our current president has created budget deficits in excess of $1 trillion each year he has served as president. In addition to ensuring that the federal government does not throw taxpayer dollars after the investments, H.R. 6213 also highlights the need of the federal government to stop propping up failed companies which cannot support themselves in the open market. The federal government should not guarantee hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer-backed loans to companies who do not have a business model that supports sufficient private investment. The administration should not pretend to be a venture capitalist with taxpayers' money. In testimony before the Rules Committee yesterday, Congressman Ed Whitfield, chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee's Subcommittee on Energy, testified that the DOE loan guarantee programs spent $15 billion but only created 1,175 jobs. That means that each job created cost taxpayers $12.8 million. These statistics demonstrate what House Republicans have been saying for years, and that is this country cannot tax and spend its way to prosperity. Instead, we must encourage the free enterprise system by preventing overregulation and promoting pro-growth policies, including tax policies that do not push jobs overseas, that create a better free enterprise system, that create not just jobs, but also careers for Americans. And they should be designed to incentivize private investment, what is known, Mr. Speaker, as the free enterprise system. Ultimately, the No More Solyndras Act puts an end to an ineffective government program. It protects taxpayers from financing the administration's wish list of projects and establishes necessary oversight to hold executive branch officials accountable for their actions. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas, my friend Mr. Sessions, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objections to order, gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this structured rule. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Republicans have brought up yet another closed process in what was supposed to be a more open and democratic House. After 2 years of broken promises, we shouldn't be surprised by this action. And we shouldn't be surprised that the Republicans are bringing up this overtly political bill just 55 days before election. H.R. 6213, the No More Solyndras Act, is just political theater. It's a bill that's going nowhere. We know the Senate won't consider it. The only thing it really does is give the Republicans another talking point to use on the campaign trail. My friends on the other side of the aisle are trying to make it seem like there was a big conspiracy to inappropriately give money to Solyndra, a company that was trying to manufacture solar panels here in the United States. They claim that there was a political effort to award Solyndra funds in an improper and possibly illegal way. And in doing so, they are attacking a Department of Energy loan guarantee program that allows private investors to invest billions of dollars in order to create thousands of jobs here in America. The Republican response to a company that went bankrupt after receiving federal loans, a company that was manufacturing alternative energy products here in the United States, was to begin investigations that turned into political witch hunts. And those investigations appear to have led us to this point by consideration of this bill that purports to end the loan guarantee program altogether. Of course, the reality is that those investigations have really been used as ammunition on the campaign trail. But what the Republicans claim they are doing today and what they are really doing are two different things. They say that they are eliminating the loan guarantee program, getting rid of it completely. But what this bill really does is bar the Department of Energy from considering new applications submitted after December 31st, 2011. That leaves $34 billion in the pipeline for applications for the Department of Energy loan guarantee program that were submitted before December 31st, 2011. And there's no deadline on when these applications must be approved. Not only that, but most of the available loan guarantee funding is for fossil fuel and nuclear projects. That's right. Republicans are claiming to end this loan guarantee program, but are still allowing it to spend tens of billions of dollars. And they are still picking and choosing the winners and losers by putting an artificial end date on the application submissions. The result will be billions more in loan guarantees for projects dealing with nuclear and fossil fuels like coal and oil, and much less for wind, solar, and hydro projects. America should be about innovation, about creating new things. We're the country who put a man on the moon. We're the country who created the car, airplane, an iPad. And we should be fostering, not stifling, innovation, especially in the area of alternative energy sources like wind, solar, and hydro. Yet the Republican leadership is showing once again that political victory is more important than American success, that winning this election is more important than fostering American manufacturing and leadership in areas like alternative energy. Mr. Speaker, this is just another example of how this Republican leadership likes to talk the talk but not walk the walk. In this case, they say they don't like the loan guarantee program, but they want their own pet industries to be able to use it. It's another example of how their rhetoric doesn't match up with their actions. But we have seen this hypocrisy for years now. This is the same Republican Party that opposed the stimulus plan but requested and touted funding from that same stimulus plan. In fact, Republican members in this House have requested loan guarantees for businesses they support, including those in the nuclear energy industry. But they oppose this program for alternative energy businesses that want to manufacture in America. And this is the flip-flopping that kind of makes my head spin. It's clear that my Republican friends don't let the facts get in the way of their political argument. It's a fact that this loan guarantee program is a success. For example, this loan program has ultimately supported 40 projects that helped keep 60,000 people employed during this economic downturn alone. It's also a fact that the Solyndra bankruptcy represented a fraction of the entire loan guarantee program. In fact, loans and loan guarantee programs only cost taxpayers 94 cents for every $100 invested. That's a pretty good return on investment. And, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Republicans that Congress needs a robust oversight program that examines the executive branch and ensures that they are not overstepping their bounds. It's ironic that these Republicans are conducting a vigorous oversight plan of President Obama, but simply looked the other way when it came to the oversight of the Bush administration. But there's oversight, and then there's overreach. Republicans looked into this issue, they held hearings and conducted an investigation. And despite their claims of political manipulation, there is simply no evidence of such manipulation. Now, don't take my word for it. Bloomberg Businessweek reported that there was, and I quote, no evidence of wrongdoing, end quote. And the Washington Post reported that, and I quote, the records do not establish that anyone pressured the Energy Department to approve the Solyndra loan to benefit political contributors, end quote. Mr. Speaker, we all know what this is. This is an election year stunt, political theater that is more appropriate for the campaign trail rather than the House of Representatives. It's a bill that supporters claim will do something that it simply will not do. And this closed process, once again, breaking Speaker Boehner's promise of a more open House. This is a bad bill, it's a bad rule, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on the rule and the underlying bill. And, Mr. Speaker, I just would like to close with one observation. We have just returned from a recess, and if the rumor mill is true, we will only be in session for 8 days before the election. I'm hearing that we're going to probably give away the first week in October. And given the fact that we're here such a short time, one would think that this would be an opportunity to come together and to pass legislation that both sides can agree on, legislation that might in fact help stimulate economic growth, might in fact help put people back to work, might address some of the real challenges that the American people are facing. You know, we don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And that's something we agree on. We ought to be able to come together and pass it. And yet what we're doing during these 8 days are debating hot-button issues and bills that are going nowhere. You know, this is a hot-button issue. We're going to be debating another hot-button issue later. Hot-button, hot-button, hot-button. Never any legislation that has any real meaning in the lives of the American people. You know, bring the President's jobs bill to the floor. Let us have that debate. Let us be able to, you know, have a vote on whether or not we ought to invest in our economy and invest in our people. My Republican friends are squandering this opportunity. I think one thing is clear, and I think it's evident by the low esteem that Congress is now held in by the American people. The American people want us to work on their behalf. And I understand, you know, the lust in this place for political power and winning elections and winning elections. I used to think that good government was good politics. But what we are doing here for these 8 days, with the exception of passing a continuing resolution, which is kicking the can down the road on a whole bunch of other budgetary issues, what we are doing these 8 days is nothing. Nothing meaningful, nothing that matters to anybody. And I just think that that's a sad commentary on the leadership of this House. So with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I know that our Democrat friends think it's absolutely nothing to lose $500 million of what that a government made a decision on. But what they really don't like is when we bring that up, when we say, part of the job of being a member of Congress as a policy body is to look at the mistakes that were made. We certainly have looked at mistakes that Republicans and Democrats, administrations and others have made. But to ignore an issue would be a mistake. And this is not just Solyndra. It was the process of a political agenda that could not pass the smell test and even make it out in the real world. It was a political agenda that was so wanted by an administration that they gave lots of money out, not just $500 million here, but to other companies. You know, today's legislation certainly highlights Solyndra as a failure in the DOE, Department of Energy's loan program, but it should be mentioned that there were other companies, not just Solyndra. It's really a political process that said, let's go do this thing whether it makes sense or not, whether it makes money, and the companies went bankrupt. And part of this comes from you've got a lot of people in the administration that wouldn't even recognize a business plan if they saw one. They do recognize taxpayer dollars. Plenty of those that were made available by this excessive spending, but accountability is now what Democrats don't like when we're saying, let's look at what the results happened and what materialized. So Solyndra is not just a one-time or one-company failure of an otherwise what would be called successful program. It's not. And this simply became the poster child, and we believe that we shouldn't repeat this failure. We believe we should effectively talk about it on the floor of the House of Representatives. We should take some bit of time. We're not here beating anybody up. You've never even heard me mention names behind the administration or who made these decisions or who pushed it. We're not trying to do that. We're simply trying to say that we believe $500 million is and a review of that should become available in the light of day to not just members of Congress, but we should vote on it and say we drew a conclusion. We think it's a misuse. So we believe any objective evaluation of the facts, and it reveals a misuse of federal dollars, of a plan that should be stopped, has stopped, but that we should at least tell what the results were. That's what we're doing here today. I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, you know, one of the things the Speaker made a promise was a more open House, and this would be a place where we could actually deliberate and various points of view would be heard. I want to yield now to the gentleman from Texas, the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Environment and the Economy, whose amendment was not made in order. So he will not have an opportunity to debate it here on the floor. I yield 3 minutes to Mr. Green.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you for the time to speak. Mr. Speaker, members, the original law that this bill amends today was actually created, the loan program was in the Energy Policy Act of 2005, passed by a Republican Congress and signed by a Republican President. The law does need to have minor reforms, but this bill goes way too far. The majority had the opportunity in our Committee on Energy and Commerce to work in a bipartisan fashion, actually fix the problems with the Loan Guarantee Program. I offered an amendment to the Rules Committee that had been supported by Republicans in our committee, but not a majority of the Republicans, to fix the problems with the program and find middle ground that would be suitable for both Democrats and Republicans alike. But the majority chose a different path. They decided to forge ahead with a partisan messaging bill that stands no chance of becoming law, even when it passes the House today. So despite the name, this bill will not prevent another Solyndra. It's the worst of election year politics. We had a chance to work together, something the American people want us to see, and one of the things we're sent here to do, fix a broken program. Instead, we're playing more politics one more time. The bill is bad policy. It doesn't do what conservatives want to do, so the Heritage Foundation opposes it. It doesn't do what the liberals want to do. It eliminates all well-balanced bipartisan agreements struck years ago, so it isn't what moderates want to do. It's legislating without accountability. The majority doesn't care that it's bad policy because it will never become law. Instead, I urge my colleagues to find the bipartisanship. Let's take this opportunity to fix a problem that we will see and craft a bipartisan bill. This is a chance to show our country that Congress can do things. One of the reasons Congress has a 10% approval rating is we're not legislating, we're messaging. This is probably the worst example of it. We're talking past each other. This is a chance to show our country that Congress can do things. Instead of this partisan circus helps confirm that the belief that Congress is broken and that it's working against the interests of the American people. I urge a no vote on the rule and support a bipartisan effort to really make sure there are no more Solyndras. And I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back, and the gentleman from Massachusetts reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to go to the report, and let's see what the report out of the Energy and Commerce Committee said. It said, and I'm quoting what would be off page 5, however, the Bush administration did not approve any loan guarantees under the program. This was due partially to the fact that the DOE office implementing the program was slow in being set up and that program funding only became available in 2007. But even after the Bush DOE had the program up and running in 2007, it ran into difficulties finding applicants whose energy projects are meritorious. In other words, they could not find somebody who was asking for the loan who could present a good business plan of not just profit and loss, but where it would fit in the marketplace to even be considered successful. And this is the reason why the Bush administration and Republicans did not do that, because they could see failure in the marketplace written all over it, even as early as 2007. I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, let me again repeat for my colleagues what Bloomberg Businessweek reported, and I quote, again, there was no evidence of any wrongdoing. Washington Post reported, and I quote, the records do not establish that anyone pressured the Energy Department to approve the Solyndra loan to benefit political contributors. I mean, you know, it's clear what's going on here. And again, bringing this bill, a bill that's going nowhere. We heard about the bridges to nowhere. This is the legislation to nowhere. I think it's bad enough. But then bringing it up under a closed process, I'm going to yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts, the distinguished ranking member on the Committee on Natural Resources, had 3 amendments. All 3 of them were denied by the Rules Committee, including a Buy America provision. What a radical idea, that we should make it in America and we should buy it in America. And that radical amendment was denied by the Rules Committee. It's hard to believe. So with that, I yield 4 minutes to my colleague from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey.
Gentleman's recognized for 4 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts. You know, in the history of this whole program, it was started for the nuclear industry. Pete Domenici, 2005. Why? Because there hadn't been a new nuclear power plant built in 30 years out in the free market, so they needed the federal government to come in and prop it up on crutches. That's the only way it would work. And so when President Obama took over, you know, he's saying, well, maybe we should do something for solar as well. And of course, the coal industry, the oil industry, the nuclear industry, they recoiled in fear that there would actually be competition in the marketplace. And when one solar company got in trouble, the Republicans pounced on solar. They pounce on wind. They pounce, you know, that's why, by the way, the Republicans are going to allow the wind tax breaks to expire this year. But they're going to keep all the oil tax breaks on the books. And so here we are today, and they have something called the No More Solyndras Act. Except for the $88 billion that they're going to grandfather in terms of the application date that they've selected. So who qualifies for that? Well, $76.5 billion would be the nuclear industry. $11.9 billion would be the coal industry. I get it now. It's not the No More Solyndras Act. It's the only $88.4 billion more for nuclear and coal No More Solyndras Act of 2012. It's just the same kind of tilted playing field that the Republicans have always had. Nuclear, oil, coal, great. Wind and solar, finally getting going. 12,000 new megawatts of wind installed in the United States this year. 3,200 new megawatts of solar. installed in the United States this year. That puts the fear of the marketplace in the coal and the nuclear, the oil industry brain. And so that's why we're out here with this kill solar and save nuclear and coal with this incredible amount of money. Now, as the gentleman from Massachusetts said, I had an amendment that I requested the Rules Committee to put in place, and that is that if your company last year lost $540 million or more, you could not qualify for a loan guarantee. Remember, Solyndra lost $538 million, so I picked $540 million. And if your company is on the verge of being delisted by the New York Stock Exchange and has already reached junk bond status with S&Ps and Moody's, you cannot qualify. I mean, come on, we're not having federal taxpayer money go to companies on the verge of being delisted and have already reached junk bond status. And they all voted no in the committee. And when I had my amendment put up before the Rules Committee, they rejected it. Now, why did they reject it? Because the United States Enrichment Corporation lost $540 million last year. It's on the verge of being delisted on the stock exchange. It's reached junk bond status, but yet nuclear will qualify. Okay? So I said, well, we can't invest in that kind of a company. And as the gentleman from Massachusetts said, the same thing is true for buying American. If we're going to have these loan guarantees, let's at least make sure that they are American jobs. And they wouldn't put that amendment in order as well. And this whole issue here is basically one of this favored oil above all agenda, not all of the above. Not when you say tax breaks for oil companies continue and wind companies die. Not when you have loan guarantees that continue on for nuclear and coal, but not for wind, not for solar. It's so transparent. It's just arithmetic, ladies and gentlemen. Solyndra loses 538. The Enrichment Corporation, nuclear, loses 540. The arithmetic's pretty simple. They both should not qualify, huh? But not these guys. No, no.
The gentleman's additional 1 minute.
Thank you. Not these guys. Oh, no. No, 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 no. Because it's not marketplace. There's no rhyme or reason to it until you start to think about what has always been their agenda. What has always been the fossil fuel industry agenda. I would abolish the entire program. You want to abolish this program? Abolish it. Put the vote out here. I'll vote for it. Get rid of the loan guarantee program. Then let solar and wind and nuclear and coal and oil all compete in the free marketplace for private capital investment. You want to know what that would do? It would put the fear of Adam Smith in the heart of the nuclear industry, because they would receive no private sector investment. None. It takes the federal government providing a crutch. And so it then requires the Republican Party to take away the loan guarantees for the competition while they're giving the loan guarantees. Federal taxpayer loan guarantees to industries that otherwise could not get any money in the private sector. The United States Enrichment Corporation can't get any private sector investment. Nuclear power industry, this loan guarantee program, for $8 billion for a program that's already $1 billion over the two Vogel plants in Georgia. The whole thing is bad arithmetic for the American taxpayer. Thank you.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, we're now well into the political extremism that we see many times as that exhibits itself not just here on the floor of the House of Representatives, but really all across this country. Those people that want gasoline to rise substantially because they really don't like gasoline. They really don't like the underpinning of how this country uses the energy that we have. Whether it's natural gas, they attack natural gas. If it's nuclear, which is a non-emitting source of pollution, they attack that. This crowd that really doesn't like free enterprise and what I believe is the heartland of this country, manufacturing, which has really taken off as a result of effective use of resources, natural resources, in this country through natural gas and the availability of nuclear power and the availability of oil which fuels our cars to where we can use the resources that were given us effectively. What they want to do is they want to tax these industries higher so that prices go up, so that consumers have to pay a lot more money. What they forget is that the cars that we fuel, the electricity that we need, is the cleanest and the best here in America. The ways these are produced are American jobs. The way they're consumed is about American jobs. The way that consumers pay for them and pay for these advantages is American jobs. And here we're looking at how $500 million worth of taxpayer money was put into an effort that not only not ever got off the ground, it quickly went into bankruptcy because it did not meet the marketplace challenges. I'm not opposed to competition. I think we stand for competition. But don't push a narrow environmentalist policy, go to the White House, go to the Department of Education and try and fund these on taxpayer dollars only to see that, whoops, we made a mistake. And then act like, whoops, we don't want anybody to know. All we're trying to suggest today is that Republicans do believe in American jobs. We do believe in American industry. We do believe in the energy industry. We believe in effective use of resources because we're trying to keep jobs here. And their narrow political environmentalist policy is what will diminish American jobs. It will diminish our ability to effectively use the resources that we have in this country, and it will put us in a circumstance, for instance, with the Keystone Pipeline, where we could use energy from a friendly neighbor to fuel American needs at a good price and avoid what may happen if we get into a circumstance overseas in the Middle East where we would be held hostage by those that have the energy that we need, when we could be having it not only close to home, but in our own home, energy made in America. So Republicans, look, all we're trying to say is $500 million that was wasted. Somebody ought to recognize that we shouldn't be doing that, and that's what Republicans are doing here today. We reserve our time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me just respond by saying when the Republicans talk about jobs, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Let me give you, I go back to what we were talking about earlier with Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey had an amendment. Let me read it. It would prevent guarantees from being granted unless the applicant certifies that at least 75% of materials and components required for construction, manufacturing, or operations are produced in the United States of America. Any facility at which construction, manufacturing, or operations are to be carried out must also be located in the United States of America. This amendment is not even allowed to be debated on this House floor. The Republicans in the Rules Committee said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So if we're going to be talking about jobs, I mean, maybe we have about different jobs. I'm talking about jobs in America. Maybe my friends are talking about creating more jobs overseas. We need more jobs here. And if we're serious about that, why wouldn't you allow that amendment to be brought up and debated on this House floor? With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
This bill ought to be renamed. No more Solyndras, but more money for nuclear elephants loan program, white elephants loan program. My friends on the other side of the aisle like to talk about the free enterprise system, but I'm sure that you're aware that Wall Street won't invest in nuclear power. The nukes can't get money from the free enterprise system, so they want government to bail them out. This bill claims to reduce wasteful spending on energy projects, but it's actually an attack on renewable energy. The real effect is laid bare by the effective date of the bill, which grandfathers the worst of the worst of the worst energy boondoggles. Specifically, it allows nuclear power loan guarantee projects to proceed even though some create exposure for the federal government of about 15 times the exposure created by Solyndra. And these programs, these nuclear loan programs, are more likely to fail. One of the biggest loan guarantees for nuclear, not even necessary. This is not my assessment. It's the assessment of Kevin Marsh, the president of South Carolina Electric and Gas Company, which is attempting to build a new nuclear power plant. He said on a call to analysts and investors, we're confident in our ability to finance this project without a loan guarantee. Could be in the $8 to $10 billion range. So the conflict here is generally Wall Street isn't investing, but you get a group of investors that think they can, but are they leveraging against the hope of government involvement? I don't know. Truth is nuclear power plants are simply not viable without massive government subsidies, which eclipse subsidies for renewable energies by orders of magnitude. The Congressional Budget Office has had this to say about nuclear loan guarantees. The CBO considers the risk of default on such loan guarantees to be very high, well above 50%. Dale Klein, former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, cautioned that nuclear plants will, quote, will not, quote, move off the blackboard and into construction, not as long as natural gas remains as cheap and plentiful as it is today. An article opposing the bill by Autumn Hanna and Henry Sokolowski in the National Review Online states, quote, the total number of projects this bill grandfathers, could I have a half a minute?
Gentleman's time has expired.
An additional 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
States that the total number of projects this bill grandfathers isn't publicly available. Par for the course with this